picture?
Oh,
So up front
yes,
or?
that'd be lovely.
Perfect. Sounds good. Recording?
Yep.
Good deal. All right, I will call the meeting to order. We will start with a roll call. McKee here, Ehrenkamp,
Here.
Nichols.
Here.
Councilors Bodema and Schultz are out today. Go on to the Pledge of Allegiance, if you'd stand and join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Going on to agenda approval, do we have any changes from staff?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We have a couple of additional items at the dais for council today. We did have a clerical change to the minutes. We did have a few of the packets inadvertently missed the liaison portion, so those are on the dais. Two minor clerical changes to the minutes. We have a cost share agreement for item 9A that was finalized today with the city attorney. And Kevin's well-versed in that, so if you have specific questions about the agreement, we can talk about that. And then we did have a resolution of support for item 9C, and that was just inadvertently not included in the paper packet.
Gotcha. Anything from council? I would propose maybe moving 10E to the beginning of new business, because we have a couple residents here, and the other items in new business are kind of our own things.
Yeah.
So, that's okay. I
Yeah.
would go ahead and make a motion to adopt, or to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hey, commission representatives, we have Jay and Sharon. Somebody in line, hopefully.
They are not yet joining us virtually.
Okay.
But
We got some time. Then we'll go right into open forum.
anyone joining us virtually can press *9 to raise your hand if you're on a phone. Otherwise, if you're on an electronic device, you can press reactions and raise your hand. Anyone wishing to speak at open forum can come to the podium and just state your name and address if you're in the audience. Mayor and council, at this time, no one's raising their hand.
Okay. Moving right along to item 6, which is a presentation, or actually a recognition, for years of service for Kevin Mattson, our Public Works Director, and for 5 years.
Excellent. And I'd just like to say briefly with Kevin, Kevin's been on the team for 5 years, and I can't believe how quickly it's flown. Kevin has been a great add to the team, bringing a lot of thoughtful discussion and different opinions to all that we do, and we're very lucky to have Kevin on the team. So congrats on 5 years. It's changed a lot in your time, and will continue to change. So thank you.
What's the biggest change, Kevin?
In the last 3 weeks, Kevin, what's the biggest change in your
Way
life?
number 3.
Oh, yeah.
You want to
Congrats, by the way.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate
Little
it.
photo op.
Are you getting any sleep? Are you getting any sleep? No?
Thank you.
Congratulations. Happy to have you.
Okay. On to consent agenda. We have items 7A through 7E. Does anyone want to pull anything?
No, thank you.
All right.
I'm good.
And I will entertain a motion to approve consent agenda
So
items.
moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Yeah,
Aye.
I just shook my head, sorry. I was doing the bottom of the page.
We're trying to be really good at catching those things.
Yeah.
Just to make sure.
I gotta
it's easier
speak
when
up.
we're doing minutes.
We should have lights that we push for approval.
There we
you
go.
go.
We could be like
Yeah, let's not
Chicago.
complicate it.
Okay, on to planning business, which consists of items 8A, 8B, and 8C, which is ProTech, the water treatment final plat, and the fence ordinance amendment. We'll have a public comment opportunity first for all three of those, and then go into item 8A.
Perfect, thank you. Mayor, anyone in the audience, if you do want to speak on any of those planning items, feel free to come up to the podium, state your name and address. Anyone joining us virtually can press *9 if you're on a phone, or if you're on
Mr.
an
Mayor,
electronic.
Just a real quick question. How many people do we have online? I know we've asked that in the past.
Sure,
Just
right
curious.
now we have 7. I would note Michelle's actually ran back to her desk for a moment. I think that there might have been a broken link on one of the
Okay.
clickable things, so we're working on getting that information.
Welcome to the people that are online
Yeah.
and everybody in the audience.
We have any
Live.
hands?
At this time, we don't have any.
Okay.
But
Then
we
we'll go
do have
right-
7 people, and so we're working on updating that link.
Gotcha. Should we wait a minute?
Yeah, we can wait just a moment here. I'm getting messages from a few
Gotcha.
folks on it, so.
Probably you're taking up too much bandwidth with your tablet.
I only use my phone,
Yeah, you wanna-
but I see the meeting code does not appear to work.
Is it now working?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that, yep.
Are you sure?
So Kendra is joining us virtually. She had a conference that she is at, so she will be joining us virtually and is getting the link as we speak.
Gotcha.
As well as one of our other
And is
applicants.
Kendra taking lead on 8A or
She
Natalie?
is not.
I'm doing, yeah, I'm doing
Natalie
8A, but
can handle it.
I'm sending her the link, so just give me one moment.
Sounds good, yeah, take your time.
Sorry about those
No,
technical issues.
no worries,
Want to make sure people know about it.
absolutely.
That's their work session.
Oh, excellent. You're able to get on.
When I found the right
we have
link on
8?
the website, I could
Perfect.
get in.
That's what I think that we were updating here. so. Technology.
All right, I tried.
Sometimes it's really good, and then occasionally we have a limit. Perfect.
All right,
If you're ready, I am
We're good?
ready.
Perfect.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. First item is ProTech's auto expansion, which includes a site plan, 2 conditional use permits, and 3 variance requests. Go ahead. So the applicants are Tom and Dan Gleason, who own ProTech Auto Repair. And the request will allow for the expansion of their existing facility to include additional repair bays as well as some warehouse space for their materials. Go ahead. This is the aerial view of their location on Commerce Street. To the north of them are the 2 city-owned properties, and further north is County Road 10. Go ahead. This is a snippet of the site plan, most of what I could get to fit on a PowerPoint slide. So primarily the existing building is to the south, and then the proposed building would pretty much double their footprint. And then as part of this also, they would be paving the parking area to the south of the site and then dedicating exterior storage on the northern end of the site with some spaces for employee parking as well. So again, the proposed expansion includes additional space for the building of 5,865 square feet with repair bays and warehouse space for the equipment and materials. The site right now shows 24 parking stalls, and the parking lot would be paved with concrete curb and gutter. And then the designated exterior storage space would be newly delineated, and they will use gravel areas for that space. So overall, the plans comply with the district lot standards. For the exterior storage, more information about the existing vegetation is needed to confirm screening of outdoor storage. The screening of the outdoor storage can meet our 80% opacity year-round requirement for the conditional use permit, which we can discuss further when we go into the conditional use permits. For the parking, what is proposed on the site plan would involve 3 variances, including the southern drive aisle width, the setback for the western drive aisle, and then expanding some parking spaces on the southeast portion of the site that were approved at a 20-foot setback, and would be the plan and shows 2 additional parking spaces at that setback when 50 feet is what's required at this time. Again, the employee parking on the north of the expansion needs to be shifted a bit further north in the site plan, just to show a separation between the building and the parking. Go ahead. The encroachment of the western drive aisle on the neighboring property does need to be addressed as a condition of approval of the site plan, regardless of the variances being approved. Right now, it's encroached. There's one area where it's encroaching as much as 2 feet into the neighboring property, according to their survey. The revised plan must also show that the vegetation on the site provides the required screening for parking spaces 11 and 12. An email from the applicant last night suggested there is vegetation there that was not shown, so we just need an updated plan showing what is there. Further expanding on landscaping, the calculations used were based on the building size, but our code requires the larger of either the building size calculation or a calculation based on the perimeter of the site. And the perimeter of the site leads to the larger calculation of required trees. Again, it's very possible the overstory and understory shrubs that are on the site currently are more than enough to suffice. I just don't know, because the current plans don't really show an inventory of what's currently there. So I just need some more information, and that is a condition of approval. For streets and access, engineering recommends a concrete apron at the entrance of the site. That is not a condition of approval based on feedback that we received during the sketch plan. So if that is something that we want to change, we should definitely discuss that. But right now, the resolution presented for you tonight, that is not required. It's just recommended.
Let's say it again, recommended apron?
A concrete apron at the entrance of the site. It's what we typically require in our city standard details. This guy can speak to that a bit better than I can, but it's a recommendation of the engineering memo, so it's no real teeth behind it other than, please do it.
Got it, okay.
Looking at the map, it looks like Concrete Science has concrete aprons in that area, but I don't see any on any of the others.
Generally, our rule of thumb is as these properties are updated, that's when we're asking them to comply with the standards we've outlined. So I believe, again, I think you might be able to speak to what properties have
Yeah, I
done
think
it.
CMRE Nelson, as you wrap to the northeast, CMRE Nelson and a commercial door, I think, were properties that upgraded with a concrete driveway.
Apple might be out of date.
Just the apron, not the driveway?
Yeah, just the
Concrete.
apron,
Okay.
basically the right of way, 10 feet.
So then further, for the utilities, the engineering memo identified a need for them to obtain a permit from Hennepin County to officially abandon their septic system on the site. And again, an update from the applicant the other night, sounds like their application for that has been submitted, so they're making progress there. Next slide. For the building materials, revised plans need to be submitted that indicate the expansion portion of the building will use an allowed building material. I believe the plan, based on conversations with the applicant, is for that to be integral colored block for the facades, but that is not what's shown on our current plan, so we just need an updated plan. And again, there were several items identified to be addressed in a revised grading plan, which is within the engineering memo, so that is something that they will continue to work through with engineering as a condition of approval. Next slide. For the conditional use permits, again, there are two. The first one is the waiver for upgrading the current building facade by 25% to an allowed material. So our CUP process does allow this to be waived, and they are, again, the plan is for the expansion to include an allowed material and just not have to update their existing building because it doesn't really make sense with the concrete block that's existing. The code identifies general standards for the CUP, and I do believe in my analysis these standards have been met. Let's go ahead. For exterior storage, that is also a conditional use permit. And so with that, there are additional standards beyond what we beyond our typical CUP process, which includes a screening requirement that exterior storage space meet 80% opacity year-round. Typically, that's done with a combination of fencing and vegetation. So that was really the only thing I identified as we need more information before we can say they have satisfied that requirement. All the other standards were met satisfactorily. And again, an update from the applicant on Tuesday night stated a desire for the council to approve the existing vegetation on the site as is. And so that might be part of the discussion of whether or not you disagree with staff's analysis that it meets the 80% opacity requirement, or we have a couple of options if we want to discuss that further. So other than that, as I said, the remaining standards for the CUP have been met. Next slide. So again, just to speak to that screening component, I am concerned about some gaps that are visible on the northwest side. I don't believe that part's visible. It just looks like it doesn't really have the screening right there from the overhead view. And then I know driving on County Road 10, I can see those trailers from County Road 10, which is a little bit further back. So I do think that we need some further vegetation there. And I'm also concerned about what the site looks like in the winter. I haven't had a chance to inspect it in the winter. When I went out, there was already vegetation. So again, that year-round capacity. So I need a better understanding of what trees are present and the types of trees so that we can better evaluate whether the 80% can be met year-round. Go ahead. For the three variances, for the first variance, we'll focus on the drive aisle on the south end of the site, which is depicted here. The southern drive aisle is shown with a width of 23 feet. Our city code requires a width of 26 feet. Overall, I believe the hardship standard has been met due to the constraints caused by the location of the pre-existing building and the many changes to city standards that were not foreseeable to the landowner when they made the decision to locate the building where they did. The parking lot, as a way to mitigate the impacts of the variance, I recommend the parking lot to be striped to just clearly define where the drive aisle is. And the Planning Commission did not recommend approval for this variance. The thinking behind that was that the expansion in 2000 was a decision by the property owner, and therefore they caused the condition that they're seeking a deviation to the code from. And that is certainly up to debate, but I speaking to the city attorney, we think that it is a unique constraint that the building location far predates our code. Variance 2 is for the western drive aisle on the western drive aisle. And the issue with that is they are proposing for it to be located at roughly 5 feet into what should be a 10-foot setback. Again, staff believes the hardship standard has been met due to the constraints of the location of the building and the need for internal circulation of emergency and oversized vehicles that they serve. So and there really is no other option. There's no ability to fit in a hammerhead on the south end of the site. The applicant should enter into an encroachment agreement with the city to address impacts of encroaching into our drainage and utility easement. And this variance was recommended for approval by the commission. Variance 3 is for the expansion of the non-conforming parking. As I said before, there are 4 parking spots shown in this area. Okay, on the left side is the 2000 site plan, where it shows 4 spaces at a 25-foot setback. And then on the right is the proposed site plan, where we're now showing 6. And I do think 6 is reasonable. I've been to the site. It comfortably fits 6 vehicles. However, the setback was only approved for 4 vehicles, and now we have a 50-foot setback. So again, due to the location of the building entrance, it makes sense for the parking to be where it's located. And if we were to be strict about a 50-foot setback, it would locate parking in a really weird spot that's going to impact the drive aisles. So staff again recommends approval of this variance, and again recommends striping the parking lot so that we don't have further expansion of non-conforming parking. And again, the Planning Commission recommended approval of this variance. So overall, Planning Commission recommended approval of the site plan CUPs and 2 of the variances. Staff recommends approval of the resolution approving the site plan and 2 CUPs. And then staff recommends approval of the alternative resolution in your packet, which approves all 3 variances. If you agree with the Planning Commission recommendation, that is the first resolution in your packet focused on the variances.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Any questions for Natalie?
This was an exceptionally well-prepared
Yeah.
report.
Thank you.
I appreciate that you presented favorable and unfavorable arguments on all of the arguments that were presented to us. That was really helpful, so thank you for putting it together with that level of thoroughness.
Thank you.
Couple of questions I have. Again, a lot of this stuff turned out really well, and I like what the Planning Commission has submitted to us and such. I've got a concern about landscape. I've got a couple of concerns about landscape. Do we know where, and the applicants are here, I can see that, do we know where city water was brought in? They have city water, they have city sewer now?
I believe they're connected.
They're connected. Where is that from? Is that off the road?
It's basically right up the driveway, if I remember it.
It's
Or-
to the northeast corner of the property, and there's a hole in the landscape,
Yep.
I guess, right there, because that's where the connection
Okay.
is.
And then my question was, do we, the city, maintain that mitigation pond?
I would say yes, we do. We actually did a step down for the
We-
last few.
We did a maintenance
We did
2 or 3 years ago, didn't we?
Yep, we did a drainage project, kind of cleaned up some of the, so I'll slow down. We did the street improvement and utility project first.
Right,
And that was primarily focused on the sewer and water.
Okay.
Sanitary sewer and water main piping infrastructure. It resulted in having to replace the street as is. So, and it left it rural, basically no curb and gutter
Yep.
on the street.
yep,
A byproduct of that project was some concerns about drainage and lack of maintenance over 40 years. And so we did some drainage work, Public Works did a lot of it. And then we also outsourced some things to a contractor. There was also a watershed
Yep.
grant as part of that. So yes, that is a city drainage system
so
we
that,
would maintain.
that mitigation pond is city maintained, but the land is still owned by the applicant?
Yeah, we have an easement over it, yep.
Then the other question I have, when I go back 4 years on the overheads, I counted in, it depends on how good a picture you look at, 28 more trees on the north side of that mitigation pond that have since been removed, I assume, as part of that cleanup of that mitigation pond and such.
It would have been that and a combination of the utility project, so those properties.
They all went
have-
because-
have Utilities that were installed through there.
Should there have been replacement on any of those things when that all went in, or is that all in agreement with the city on an easement and stuff? I don't wanna cause problems and stuff, but I'm just trying to,
I mean, well, there's 2 different projects there, so when we did the utility project and went through, we acquired those properties from that previous
Yeah.
landowner.
That whole area back there.
And so if we had to remove properties, if we had to remove trees from that, it was negotiated on what we replaced, kind of on an individual basis. So my recollection was before I was here, but my
Yeah.
recollection is that when we got those easements, individual property owners could negotiate getting additional trees planted back. So we didn't plant any back because we don't want trees planted over top of our infrastructure.
I understand that, but,
And then with the stormwater project, we only took down either we met with some landowners to the east and to the north, well, we're the landowner in the north, but most of those trees we took down were like what we would call nuisance trees. That pond had.
yeah, I can't tell what
Yeah,
they
it's hard
were
to
and
tell, but
stuff.
we'd have to go out there and mark it, but it's inner easement, it's nuisance trees, those impact drainage, they're not were never intended to be there, and nor should, I would argue, they'd be relied on for screening, because the purpose of that area is stormwater function, right? So, they can go hand in hand, and we don't just take them down to take them down, but, I would argue, there was no vegetation.
We don't want to put trees over top of any of those things and stuff. I know I assume, Natalie, you're getting counts on all of the trees and everything that are there right now and such.
Yeah, my
And
understanding is the applicant is working on getting a better inventory of what's there.
Okay.
And I'm definitely not trying to make anyone's life harder. If I look at this and the vegetation provides balance in the winter, particularly is my concern at this point, because if I can see a gap clearly in the summer, to me, that suggests there's going to be a bigger problem in the winter. I could be wrong, and I just need more information before, and I think it can be handled with the current resolution. There is a chance I could require more planting, but it would definitely be, I'm not going to require anything further.
but no fence. At one point, I saw a fence
Yeah.
on
That was
on
my
a
mistake.
drawing. That was a
an
mistake.
error. Yeah,
Okay.
and then like, again, that's kind of why I've circled that western area. I just need more
There's
information.
just a little corner there on that portion and the
Yes.
corner on the northeast
So I
that
think
are
it's something
concerns of
we
yours.
can address with the applicant, and then speaking with the city attorney, if the applicant does not want to install what I end up telling them they need to install to meet a requirement, then it could be brought back to the city, planning commission and city council as another variance. But I don't feel comfortable tonight saying they have met the 80% opacity rule, no.
I understand. There was some questions there.
Yes.
You guys already know we want to help a lot of our existing businesses and such and do this stuff. So I'm seeing that. Obviously, I use them numerous times, and I've been through their lot numerous times with my past experiences and stuff, and would we do or need any recommendation on that semi-trailer that's sitting there? Is that storage that we talk about, or that can sit there as outside storage and stuff? There's nothing that's gonna come back?
Yeah, it would be outside storage. I'm not planning
Okay.
on any code enforcement action on that. We just need to screen it, because that is very visible from the road.
It's high enough. And then I drive through the industrial park all the time. When we talk about a fence and everything, we've got other businesses there that the fence is 80% opaque, or non-opaque, whatever the words
I
are.
know what you mean.
But then there's 8 to 10 more feet of trailers sticking above that fence and such. That's not,
So I think
it's a concern of mine. If we ask them to do something,
well, and again, this is coming about because of the site upgrade. So with those other sites, if they were to come in.
If
with
they were to
upgrades,
upgrade-
We would apply the same rule of thumb with them. It's, as things are upgraded, that's been our policy, is to try to address those outstanding issues. Furthermore, I'll point out, the reason why we're having to approve it as a CUP is because this was not designated as outdoor storage before, so it was not applicable to
understand that.
screening requirements. It was considered a parking lot, but in an effort to work with them, we decided to delineate that to try to offset some of the paving requirements.
And then when I go back to, the parking lot across the street from West Side and such, we're requiring fencing and screening and stuff on all of
Yes,
those,
and we
okay?
also did help me with the name of the other auto repair business down there.
Lithgow.
Lithgow, thank you. We also required significant screening for them. We did make an exception for a portion of it due to a cross easement between two properties.
Yeah, there was the east side of that
Yeah.
property that was.
But they were told to
moved
comply
out,
with the
okay.
rest of the screening requirements, and they were also required to completely pave the lots that they have, so.
I'm seeing all this in my head and stuff, and
Did you have any other questions for Natalie?
I was going to ask if we did decide to carry the 80% opacity in the areas where we're seeing sparseness, what would the mechanism for meeting that be? Is there a minimum tree height that would be required? Roughly how many would that be?
Yeah, I think it would be that we would want to see an overstory tree, and I like, in my mind, 80% opacity means in the winter, I'm at least seeing branches in the way. So, it doesn't necessarily need to be evergreens right there, but I do think we just need to just beef it up a little bit. I just would like to be able to further analyze it.
okay.
So are we talking like 2 trees then, 1 for each corner? Or is it
I don't have.
10
that
trees, or-
I
think that's
can
what we
make the
need to
promise
figure
that it'd
out.
be as minimal as possible. Like, I wouldn't require them, I wouldn't go over the top. It would just be enough to get some branches in the way of that trailer, and I think we could be pretty much satisfied, so.
And that's regarding the email that the applicant sent in, or someone from your guys' group sent in, and then you sent out to council? Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. Makes sense. Any other questions? Otherwise, the applicant.
I'll be quiet for a while.
Please.
Okay.
Thanks.
Go right ahead.
I was gonna comment, maybe you just mentioned it, is that I've got letters from the 2 property owners to the west and then the one to the east that are perfectly happy with the screening as is. The northwest corner, there is a hole there. We used that, I think we even cleared it, because when the sewer project was done, I lost my driveway for 7 weeks. Now, that's pretty fun to try to run a business without anybody getting in.
Yeah.
So conversely, the 2 of us, when their driveway was blocked off, we used that as a getaway across the other one's parking lots to get traffic in and out.
Gotcha.
I'm going to need it when we pave. We intend to start paving on, or we're gonna do gutters and tear out our aprons and do those the 4th of October. We need to do that because of timing with contractors.
Okay.
The only way we're getting it done is the fact that they happen to be over at West Side Tire on that day, and they're gonna finish up the day by doing our curbs. And the paving, the intention is to put at least the first level or first layer of blacktop down before the fall. I don't know if we're gonna have time to get the final level or
Right.
layer down, but we'd have the curbs and gutters in and a first layer of asphalt before the end of the season. And
Gotcha.
that's coming very soon. And I guess that was really, that opening in the back, we're gonna need it, and
Can you pull up the map quickly as he's typing
the
that?
property owner expressed the same interest, that he's fine with leaving it as is, because you don't know what could happen in the future. This is just
Can you
a way-
point to that, Tom?
Sure.
That opening when it comes up? I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
No, that's great.
It's right back here. And it goes on to Excel Medical, right here, exactly where it is.
Is that one of the 2 areas you had circled, Natalie?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep, that area.
And the other corner.
Yeah, and then the
was
other
over
corner
here.
right there, yeah.
Gotcha.
But, it happened. What if it happens again? And no one's got a plan for it, but the same thing, we enter into a mitigation
Yeah.
agreement there. There's no plans to do anything, but you don't know, so you're being prepared for it. One of the letters too from this property owner, that we didn't encroach, Mother Nature did.
Mother Nature washed you out.
Wash that over there. All the water off of this building comes down here. There's one of the runways
Yeah.
right there and goes down. All the water off of here, you can't see the building, but their gutter dumps off of the north, dumps off the corner here, runs this way. So I've got all this water coming here, and that's what moved the gravel. The owner said, I don't care if you leave the gravel there, because I said, I'll give it to you. you can have it. And we will move our road over closer. The safety committee or whatever it is said if you can give me 16 or 18 feet there, I'll make it work, it'll be fine. So we're gonna give you 18 feet. I'm not gonna change where that gravel is, because it's just gonna go back there. And they're happy with the screening, both of these, and C. Emery Nelson as well, that they see no need to do anything further. And I mean, 35 years, how many complaints have you had?
And personally, I know we don't have anything from the Treptows to the north and stuff.
So we
They've
own
not
the
voiced
property
concern.
directly to the north. The
And,
city owns these.
That's all city there? Okay.
Yeah, the city owns all that there.
Okay.
Yep.
And I was gonna say something else, but I mean, that.
So in the future, if I may ask another question, and I don't know, who only knows when would this all end up being city streets, fully curb gutter, drainage, storm sewer put in, or is it gonna be like this for a significant amount of time?
I think it would be a fair amount of time before we're back in there, just because we spent all that money on the road. You know, it might be 30 years, it might be
Okay.
the whole, it's really gonna be the development, you know, these are kind of undersized lots, so it'd be really an initiative of the area and the land users to.
It'd have to be a big change for
Yeah,
something to
it's not
happen.
On any imminent scale, I'd say 25 to 30 years before we're back in there for anything.
The other thing I'd mention is we've got from this corner to the back here, 5 feet of fall.
Yeah.
Which is, because in the ordinance says that screening can be accomplished with berms and landscaping and stuff, and just 5 feet of fall is more than what the 4-foot fences are in seats.
So, Counselor, I am concerned because the site plan suggested a setback of 5 feet for that western drive aisle, and that's what the resolution for approval is based on for the variance. And from the sounds of it, we're talking about not addressing the drive aisle, which was a condition of approval in the resolution for the site plan. And we're also saying no setback for that western drive aisle. So I just keep that in mind as we look at those resolutions.
Yep.
We would be addressing the drive aisle.
I'm sorry, I thought you said you weren't going to touch the gravel.
Well,
No, they just leave what's there, is what he
yeah,
said.
and
They'd
we
still
would
have
make
the
it
road.
wider by moving it to the east.
So you're gonna
So you're still,
expand it
there's a
here.
10-foot setback for that, so
Yeah,
the edge
it's-
of that gravel should be 10 feet back to meet code. So if we're not moving it at all, is that,
Well, whatever's washed onto that easement, or in the 5-foot setback, what's the point of moving it? I mean, it's gonna go right back there. We're not using it, Mother Nature put it there, and from the property line, or that setback, we will be, I think the road right now is about 16 feet in most places. It does get a little narrower in one spot, but we'll be 18 feet wide. But
again, that's just not quite what's shown on the plan. So I'm just a little concerned that the site plan doesn't quite reflect what you're saying. But if that's the case, again, the part of the conditions of approval for the site plan was to remove the gravel from the encroaching property, or from the property it's encroaching onto. So if that's not what we're doing, we'll just have to adjust that resolution, is what I'm trying to say.
And that's, I mean, this figure here, what's in the packet shows it being removed. So we'll just have to.
On what page?
Coordinate that when we execute the project.
Yeah, the site plan.
Thanks, Tom.
The first, so after the certificate of survey, the first plan shows
Okay.
a
Yeah.
19.99 foot wide drive aisle that's 5 feet from the property. And then the feedback during the sketch plan was for that to be addressed. So it's just not quite what matches up with my analysis that informed the resolution. So we'll have to make adjustments if we're not going to correct that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what adjustment could be made.
And that drive aisle is bituminous or?
We,
It's gravel.
It's gravel.
It's gravel, yeah.
Is it remaining gravel?
From the corner there.
This is
Okay,
remaining gravel.
okay.
And I would say that does change some of the findings of fact included in the variance as well. Because I was talking about how that it does accomplish our goals because it does provide a separation from the property line still at the 5-foot setback, and that wouldn't be true if it's encroaching on the neighborhood property. So it kind of changes things if that is the case.
Let's see here. Yeah,
There's no way we can pull up this figure and just clarify with the landowner that we're all talking on the same page, because this is what was submitted. And I just want to make sure that there's not a misinterpretation. Is there a way we can pull up this figure and just double check his intention? Just to clarify.
So what we're talking about is this drive aisle.
And you can see the, I don't know if
Yeah, I appreciate it, thank you.
to clarify, you can see the existing driveway is reflected by these lines. So you can see how they come over to the property line and back, and then you can see his new proposed, is shifting it off the property line right there and pulling it in off the property.
And there's a proposed,
And that's what's shown in the plans, that's what we had asked for, and I think the property has made a statement that you're planning to leave it exactly where it is and just build it in.
Well, it's not wide enough is what I understood
Right.
to be the issue.
So
So we will
So
make
he's
it
thinking
wide.
One of
build
the
this
issues.
in, whatever the necessary feet is.
But then you're gonna
what's shown
con-
in this plan is it's actually moving and being built in, so there's a distinction there, and that's what Natalie's referenced.
in one of the drawings, there shows a retaining wall that's gonna contain the rock, or?
That was-
Architects, we
Okay.
have no intention of doing it, I don't see the need for it.
So what would prevent a washout again if we ask you to?
It's holding up now. There is some wash, but man, there used to be about a foot cut that
Yeah.
the water would do, and that's held up. But some gravel has moved, and it's going to, but there isn't room to do 20 feet and 5 feet of easement there. I mean, we are in the easement.
We might be able
And we will enter into the agreement,
If it
the
was 60
encroachment agreement, without any issues, so, so we'll make it wide enough that, it's 18 feet all the way through.
Well, I think there's an error in the landscape and architectural plans showing a drive aisle of 18 feet, but the site plan shows the drive aisle as 19.99. He requested in the site plan that it be included, so he made it wider on his plans as well, which I had asked for a correction and haven't gotten.
Okay.
So,
Is there something else we could put between the drive aisle and the property that won't wash out, but that will not be drive aisle material?
Well,
yeah, somebody to
I mean,
mark that
I
it's
don't
not.
know, and there's riprap under there, I mean, we use large rock and then we put gravel on top, and it allows the water to go through and travel through the riprap and get away, so it's kind of a little culvert, if you will. It's a steep enough slope, and I have all the water from the two neighbors coming at me, it's pretty hard to manage. We've redone the road, I think, 2 or 3 times. This last time was held up excellent, and it's been, I don't know, 10 years maybe since we did it, and it's worked really good. It used to maybe slope too much so that it threw everything right in that spot. We leveled it off, and it now has been holding up just fine. And, I mean, there'll be gravel there, but we're not driving on it, we're not driving on it now. You know, it's just, I don't know, do I mean paint it green?
Can you stripe the drive aisle? Maybe that would be one way to delineate it.
Something along the lines of something to mark that that's the the western border of that. As opposed to just kind of, even though it might not be used, that it kind of bleeds over into the adjoining property, which, again, they seem fine with. And I don't so much have a problem with the fact of some gravel being left behind, but I don't want it to accidentally get wider on both ends, and then technically we're approving something that's on an adjacent parcel that we can't really do.
I would argue that's happening even with the current encroachment. We would be approving something on their property without any kind of formal encroachment agreement between the two properties.
Well, I've got a letter that was submitted from the property owner.
And I appreciate that, but property owners change. And so it's not formalized right now.
Well, there
You're-
could be a
So-
legal document drawn up that says we,
And that
like an easement.
And
Right,
I'm
yeah.
further concerned that we have conflicting site plans that show just conflicting information. So
Yeah.
at this point, I'm very concerned. That was not my understanding from the narrative. It said they would be addressing it, and now they're saying they're not going to. So I'm concerned.
There's a significant elevation change also from those properties to the west, down to the bottom of that wash, so to speak. If I remember right, isn't there chain link already in there too? And then all of the brush and stuff that has grown in and such? For it to be cleaned up, it would take a lot between the property owner to the west and them to really clean that up.
So it says in their narrative for the variance for the west drive aisle, we propose moving the drive aisle off the neighboring property and towards the current building. We will widen the drive aisle to get as close as possible to the 20-foot mark within the space allowed. So again, I'm
Yeah,
hearing
I know what
conflicting
you're saying.
information. So if we want to further evaluate this, we may need to use our ability to extend the review period to 120 days to allow for consistent plans to be submitted, and update a narrative so we can update the variance and update the resolution to exclude the removal of the encroachment and to require a private encroachment agreement between the two properties to allow for the gravel to remain.
I'm trying to see if there's a way to do
Can I
that.
ask a question?
City encroachment too, because
I
we
mean,
have to
city
maintain that
encroachment.
drainage.
Yeah.
Because the primary goal and reason for that easement is to be able to maintain that drainage from the properties to the south. And one benefit of moving the drive off the property line would be able to develop some improvement there where you could channelize the flows and when you build a road over top of an area that's draining water, you're having a fighting battle, which the applicant's describing. So one benefit of moving it in I see that as a benefit of moving it off the property line.
So the requirement that we have is the drive aisle can't be closer than 5 feet to the property line, based on the variances that have been written. What constitutes drive aisle material? Is it the fact that it's gravel?
It's a gravel drive aisle, so the gravel would be the drive aisle. So if the edge of the gravel is still encroaching on the property, we have not addressed the setback for the drive aisle.
So
wanna-
striping and reorienting wouldn't be adequate to say the drive aisle is now elsewhere?
Gravel.
Yeah, you'd have to put like rocks or posts in the gravel.
Yeah,
so you didn't
something
wanna
to
steal it off.
mark.
Yeah, it would just,
I like the post idea. Is
you'd
that
have to have
viable?
some sort of delineation. If you
Right.
didn't want to remove the gravel, you'd have to have some sort of delineation that would.
Keep cars off of
Yeah.
it. That makes it not a drive aisle, right? The fact
Yeah, and
that
then
cars
it's-
can't go
yeah,
there?
I don't know, that's probably more expensive just peeling the gravel out, and then you got a snowplow, obstacle there too, depending on what you use for the delineator, so. I think the simplest would be to peel it back 5 feet, and just kind of channelize the drainage off the road, but
But then that easement then is our drainage easement,
Well, we have 10
What
feet
you're
there.
saying.
We have 10 feet on their.
5 on both sides,
But likely if
No,
you're.
it's 10 feet on both sides.
10
Yeah,
feet
so
on
we
both
have 20
sides.
feet total, and likely pulling it back 5 feet would be a
Compromise.
compromise. Normally, we wouldn't even allow that, but it would be a compromise to get some delineation to help the drain, to allow some room for drainage. It's not gonna be perfect. I think that's been acknowledged in some of these,
Yeah, again, too, on the other side of the property, that's a significant step up.
yeah.
And there's a chain link, if I remember what's in there, and a tremendous amount of overgrowth. So, I mean, we don't even have 10 feet of
Well, it'd have to, it probably.
clearance on the west side.
It probably wouldn't have to be maintained, so, theoretically, we have easement there.
Yeah.
A project could come in that 20 feet and improve that drainage way, so be desired. There's probably enough room to do some sort of drainage improvement.
Is there?
But you're correct, it would probably, and that's why it's split between the properties. We don't want to have it all on one property, not the other. So technically, that 20 feet we have is to be able to maintain drainage. And that's why I want to keep everything out of it, so that we can maintain drainage. And there's, in certain cases, it's not as needed. In this case, he's describing a drainage problem. There's at least some drainage going that
Okay.
way. And
So we could do everything else except leave that for future discussion between you and them, or between the city and
Well, that's what
them
I was
as
trying to
far as
figure out.
that? You know what I mean?
An improvement project beyond what's in Natalie's report, or what do you?
No, you're saying extend that variance and that research,
I think there was
that portion of it to
I think it
120
affects
days.
the site plan overall too.
Good, yeah.
Part of the conditional
How do you break
approval
apart
for
the
the
site
site plan
plan?
was to deal with this, to improve this part of the site, and they're saying now they're not going to improve it. So if that's truly what's,
Well,
Proposed.
what I heard, and we were hearing the same thing, I think, it's just, we'll leave the gravel, but we're gonna make it the proper width and stuff. We want something that delineates that edge of that road. But then we gotta do something too to prevent any more wash out down into that.
Because if you just
Small
remove the
ravine,
gravel,
too.
then you have the likelihood of additional washout or whatever you backfill that with, right? It'd have to be something that's stabilized.
Because it's where your drainage is, yes.
How do you guys feel about putting in posts at the outside edge of your drive aisle?
New drive aisle.
No, I guess we're not. The one thing though, that, I mean, if we move it, now I don't know if I can get the 18 feet that we're trying to accomplish. I thought that was our big concern, was the width.
yeah, and the site plan
And
shows
we
it
could
as
move to the
20.
east and have 18 feet and leave the edge right where it was. And if,
So 18 feet from the new eastern edge to the existing western is what you're,
It's 20 feet on the
yeah, from the existing western, from the property line, where it encroaches, we're not driving there, we're not using it. We could put posts there and still get the 18 feet, because we're running into the building, trying to make it any wider.
So the site plan again shows the improved drive aisle setback 5 feet with a 20-foot width. So again, I'm not sure where the discrepancy is, but the site plan submitted to me suggested a setback and a 20-foot width. So if that is incorrect, I need revised plans that show what that they're actually proposing to do. The resolutions are based on the site plans submitted to us, so this makes basically the resolution invalid in front of you tonight.
did you have something else you wanted to add?
Well, it was just kind of on your point is that you have the washout that's encroached. And if we were to go from the property line over and simply take that gravel that's washed out and now we've, kept it on our side, one rainfall that goes right back. And currently, the way that it's filling the ditch with the riprap and stuff is preventing further erosion and more costs to the city with additional drainage that really shouldn't be needed, it's functioning as it should. So the thought was like, let's keep this preventative maintenance there to keep it from going on. We'll just consider our drive aisle on our property, and that is no longer ever going to be used. It's just what happened to go there. So that was really my comment there. And to Natalie's point, yes, I think there is a discrepancy, and I don't have the architectural landscape plans in front of me, but we requested them to be an 18-foot drive aisle, and then submitted that to the site plan engineer, who then had it changed to 19 times. I don't know if we have those on file.
And when did you guys say you're planning on having the asphalt and curb and gutter contractor?
Starting, weather permitting, October 4th.
So our next meeting is October 13th. So,
I'm wondering if that's probably the best route forward is to,
Yeah, I mean.
Well, we don't need a permit to pave and
Pull your driveway
put the
there, so
curbs
that might
in.
be necessary.
So, we want to take advantage of the contractor's availability.
right.
And probably, we've had conversations like this before, and cost, I'm assuming. If we wait a season, the cost is gonna go up too for them.
I guess what I was thinking is, I'm hoping that that doesn't impact that.
It needs correct plans
With-
to reference.
So,
Next meeting being the 13th, and,
so
oh, sorry, I had the wrong month in my head of what it will be.
It is October.
October 13th is the next meeting. So I would note that in order for the site improvement agreement and us to authorize moving forward with the site plan, we need the plans and the cost estimates to be, to make those
Accurate. Yeah.
improvements.
I'm really concerned that we don't seem to have a correct site plan that reflects the
Yeah.
actual plans. I'm really concerned with approving it tonight. I don't think we have enough information.
If we move the road, can we move forward?
If we follow the site plan as shown, that I base the resolution of approval on, I am less concerned about moving forward, yes.
Yeah.
But
Just gets awful close to the building, but, I mean, the safety committee, and he was the fire chief, he said 16 feet, so we might have to go to that in order to make things work out.
they had said 20 feet in the memo. I think we could do some wording in our resolution to allow me to confirm that number, just because the memo doesn't reflect that. If public safety is fine with 16 feet width, then I would be fine with a 16-foot width as long as we're getting the setback.
The plan did show the desired widths, with
Yeah,
some room
it
to
does.
spare.
And I think also the grading plan showed a retaining wall, probably, we're thinking it was probably in an attempt to address some of the drainage.
Yeah.
Drainage concerns.
Yes, but that isn't what they're intending to do, so it's,
Right.
again, we just don't seem to have plans that actually reflect their intent.
And if, I think one of the discussion points is, do we need to make any changes to the resolution for the landscaping request?
For the landscaping request, I don't think so. I think if they're unhappy with anything that we end up requiring, the
Fine.
city attorney said we could have them come back through a variance request.
Yeah.
That would supersede the resolution, so we don't need to make any changes to the verbiage to that. Unless council disagrees with my recommendation.
No, I agree with that. I'm just trying to think, even, so let's say the change was made, I still think we might have a problem to the road here, of approving a site plan that isn't matching.
Yeah, because, yeah, these dates, well, okay, so if we're going to backpedal a bit, and we're gonna drop the issue of the western drive aisle, and they are going to do the setback as shown on the site plan dated 8/10/2022, I think it would be fine. If we're talking about saying that the site plan does not reflect what they intend to do, then I don't think we are fine. But it sounds like they're willing to concede this point in an effort to move forward.
It'd be that site plan minus the retaining wall that was not.
So the grading
Yeah.
plan needed to be revised anyways.
Okay.
So I think that
Gotcha.
much
It
would
can
be
be covered
addressed
there.
with the revised grading plan.
Okay.
So the stipulation would be pulling it off and then making sure they can maintain drainage. So that retaining wall, they might be able to tweak their design to eliminate that wall, but the conditions would be to maintain that north-south drainage and build it offsite, so, and then wherever the slope is, they'd have to work with our engineering team. If they could eliminate that wall, we're always for eliminating walls.
Yeah.
That would really be their choice. They're, looking at this, there may need to be a small wall, when we actually get into the final detail, there may need to be a wall, but we would work with them to eliminate it. It would just be the two goals, to be maintain the north-south drainage and then be able to build the driveway to where you want it in the west.
So I think paragraph 16 of resolution 2022-111, I think we would just revise that to say a revised grading plan showing that drainage can be maintained.
Yep, the
Must be
north-south
submitted.
drainage,
Yeah, so
Because we can't, do something that impedes drainage coming to that property
Yeah.
from the south.
By maintain, you just mean not do something that creates that it can't happen.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, doesn't back up water in that area.
No, I don't have that.
And that was, what resolution, what, was it
So
11?
basically, it's,
and
yeah,
16?
it was 111, paragraph 16, so it says a revised grading plan. I would add the verbiage showing showing drainage can be maintained, must be submitted, and I think that would cover flexibility needed with the grading plan.
Okay, I will make a motion to amend resolution 2022-111 to add the language as presented by Natalie.
I'd second that.
Any discussion?
Question, is that the resolution that deals with approving all three variances, or the one that's just for
I
two?
separated the two out
Yeah.
since there was some disagreement, not disagreement, but staff had different recommendations than the commission. So 111 is just the site plan and the two CUPs.
Gotcha.
And
And the
then
variances are a separate
the
one.
variances would be next.
Okay, that's a whole separate set of resolutions? Okay, sorry.
Okay. Had a motion and a second. Had a discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, now, on voting on it, are there any other points want to get brought up, or issues or questions there? Okay. Then I will entertain a motion to approve resolution 2022-111 as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, now on to the variances. We have the two different recommendations, the staff recommendation, the planning commission recommendation, which is essentially a difference of one variance there. Any questions for staff or the applicant on that?
So my understanding from earlier reviews is that the expansion that happened in 2000 is where that southern drive aisle was established, and there wasn't parking shown in that plan. But it was put in place at basically that time. And then the city adopted a new code in 2004, and now there would be a restriction from 2004 forward, but as the site was originally planned and implemented, there wasn't a requirement in place in that area.
Or, again, I'm not quite certain what was in effect in 2000, so it's either that there wasn't a standard or that it satisfied the standard. So either way, it really was not a concern at that point. Yeah.
So the planning commission's recommendation not to go forward with that variance was based on the idea that the landowner created the issue, but I don't believe they created the issue if the requirement came into effect after they began using the
I agree.
site. So I would disagree with the planning commission on that fact. So therefore, I would be in favor of alternative resolution approving three variances rather than two.
Want to make a motion?
I so move.
I would second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 There we go.
And just, if I can make one comment.
Go for it.
The planning commission spent a significant amount of time on this, and staff had great information there. Thank you very much to both. So,
And if you guys just want to make sure to touch base with staff, or staff touch base with them, and we can sort out whatever needs to be followed up on and take it from there. Perfect. Thank you, guys. On to 8B, which is the water treatment facility, site plan, and variances.
Kendra, we've got you. I'm not hearing that though, Kendra. Just. Oh, Kendra, are you?
Jess, I am unmuted and it's working on my end.
Okay. Sounds like our folks virtually can hear, but we're not able to hear.
I can hear her in there.
Okay. Sound good?
I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Kendra, give us
I think
just a
we'd,
moment.
we'd be better at this by now.
Oh, here we go. There is, we're at the speakers were muted. Kendra, can you try again? Oh.
Jessica? Hello? Jessica?
Should I have their call in?
Ever call in?
Yeah, Kendra, do you mind calling?
Kendra, call my cell phone, please. I think I get better service. My personal cell phone, I don't have my work cell phone. There she is. Hello?
All right, I muted myself
A little
on the
bit
screen.
Can you mute your speaker? Your computer, I mean? All right, now try.
Okay, how about now?
Perfect.
All right, well, don't know why that was so challenging today. I apologize if it's on my end, but this is the request for the water treatment plant. It's a site plan and 3 variances for this essential service. Next slide, Jessica. And is there a new program? I did keep this pretty brief, but I believe Ash and Steve are in the audience tonight as well. The site plan approval will allow construction of the water treatment plant, which is shown sort of in the center of the site, a well house on the north for the well itself. You can see that there on site today. And parking and drive aisle for access to the facility. And you can see in the southeast corner of the site is shown a future roadway extension. The county, Hennepin County comments are that if it's possible to make an extension to the southeast as an alternate route, they would prefer that access on 116 be eliminated in the future and alternate access provided. So that's what that's showing on this screen. There are 3 variances being requested as part of this application. The first is a variance from the, and I'll talk about each of these individually, but a variance from the plant material screening, a variance to allow plant material screening of the transformer and generator in the southern part of the site, rather than a building or 6-foot fence around the entirety of the utility. Second, an overhead door that's visible from County Road 116. And third, an accessory structure, the well house itself, in the front yard. The Planning Commission voted 3-1 to recommend approval of the site plan and 2 variances, but denial of the screening variance for the transformer generator. So I want to talk about each of those variances and then look at the alternatives for the building itself. So if you go to the next slide, Jessica. The first variance is generally where that arrow's pointing. There's a transformer and a generator needed to support the facility. And the plan prepared provides landscaping around the 4 sides of those utility components. And that landscaping complies with section 1060 of our code, but does not comply with the new Northeast District standard, which requires a 6-foot wall or fence around that type of equipment. And Natalie and I believe that that was probably a result, that language was probably a result of being deep in the Wright-Hennepin analysis, and we don't believe that that's was the initial intent of staff. Nevertheless, that is the standard. Staff believes that the landscaping can provide buffering and screening of that. However, the Planning Commission did not and recommended denial. Denial of the variance means that a wall will need to be built around all 4 sides of the transformer and generator to match the building, or a 6-foot board fence or a plastic fence, not a chain link fence with slats, would be required to be built. Next slide is a variance for an overhead door visible from County Road 116. Again, this is a new standard in the Northeast District, and what it says is no loading docks or overhead doors shall be visible from county roads or residential property. In this case, we believe that the practical difficulty standards have been met because while County Road 116 is on the west, the properties to the north, south, and east are residential properties. There is no direction the overhead door could be facing and comply with this standard. Next slide. The third variance is for an accessory structure, the well house in the front yard. A well house could simply be screened, or the well, instead of being a well house in a building, could be screened with a fence or landscaping, and that would comply with the code standards. However, for a variety of reasons, the Public Works Director prefers a building that's really a kind of a safety issue and a maintenance issue. And while either alternative provides compliance with the screening requirements, this accessory building in the front yard does require a variance from our code, which would only allow those in the side or rear yard. And the well itself cannot be shifted on this site. The well is where the well is. It could not be shifted east to be in the side yard. Therefore, staff does recommend approval of this third variance. Next slide. I wanted to show a couple of alternatives, and I believe the council's already seen these, so this is more for the public, but this shows 2 roof alternatives. The one on the left is the proposed roof. The one on the right is an alternate roof with the gables. I think you saw this at your last council meeting. The next slide shows the same roof line options on a 3-cell option. And as I understand it, these are bid alternatives that staff is proposing. But again, the left is the proposed roof on a 3-cell option, and the right is the alternative roof with gables. I might have said that wrong. The left is the 3-cell option with the proposed roof, and the right is the 3-cell option with the alternative roof with gables. Next slide. We provided 2 alternative resolutions. Option number 1 is approval of the site plan and all 3 variances. And option number 2 is the Planning Commission recommendation, approving the site plan, the 2 variances, and denying the variance for the screening of the transformer and generator, and amending the landscape requirements to, it was a very general recommendation, but to add more coniferous trees on site. And approving option 2 as recommended by the Planning Commission will require a modification to the site plan, as I said, to add a wall or fence around that equipment. So with that, Mr. Mayor, council members, I'm happy to answer questions. And as I said, the design team is in the audience as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I had a couple questions that came to me as I was listening. Can we talk about the overhead door? Can we get that graphic back up for a second? So I understand there's no way to do a side of the building where an overhead door would work. I have a question. Does it have to be an overhead door? Could this be like a swing out barn door style instead to meet code requirements instead of overhead?
Just due to what the purpose is, knowing that this is really that institutional, this is a spot where we have, parked vehicles being able to storage there, I think you need the overhead door just for the size and the use that's being proposed for it, so.
Is this like a 12-foot kind of
Like
a,
garage door type overhead door, so the 12-foot type door.
okay, is it actually 12 foot on the plan? It didn't look like it was,
It's this door down, yep.
Mm-hmm.
To
Maybe
the
it's a
garage.
10-foot door, but it's a smaller kind of overhead door to bring equipment in now, so just due to the functionality of the treatment plant, we need that for it, so.
Whether a swing door would meet code or not, that's a planning question, but for the use of that space, we would want that type of door.
okay.
Makes sense.
All right, very
Anything
good.
else?
My other question is on the generator variance.
Mhm.
And so, how big is the generator? There's like a fuel tank with this? Is it natural gas fired? What are we thinking?
Yeah, so would be natural gas, but if you drive out around County Road 101, you know where our lift station is by the Lions Park?
Mhm.
You see the generator there? Similar to that, it might be a little larger just for this facility, but that at least is a real life example. So the pad is 18 feet by 8 feet that it sits on, both the transformer and the generator. We'd want some clearance around it, so it'd be that size with probably about 3-4 feet around it if we're gonna add a fence.
Okay. Does a fence fit in the area as it's designed if we wanted to go that way instead of having vegetative screening?
I think the fence fits, it's really functionality. We would have to add some gates, we'd work around that, just being able to get the equipment in that's necessary to maintain it. So we'd have to just evaluate really where the gates, it fits, we can make it work, but we feel like this met the intention. We try to meet the intention while still giving the functionality of everything, so.
Okay.
The other thing I want to be cognizant of is that's then facing residential. So we'd want to keep in mind what looks best of the options as well. That's probably in the spot that will have the most future residential looking at it from the south and east.
Yeah, my initial thought on it was, I would prefer to see the fence, I guess, just because it is infrastructure that it's not extremely attractive on its own. Trees can be good, but they're not always healthy. And especially if we're thinking we're not going to have irrigation on the site, there's greater risk of dieback over time. And a nice fence can last a long time and not require much maintenance either. So I'd prefer to see it just go with the fence, personally.
Want to make a motion? Is there any other items that you wanted to cover on this, either of you?
Just a real quick question. At the start, Kendra, you talked about the county wants that alternative entrance to the southeast to eliminate the entrance off of 116. Is that correct?
In the future, they would like, if
Okay.
in fact it's possible to make a connection to the southeast, which we did show as part of a ghost plat when
Yep.
we subdivided the property, they would like that. We certainly would continue to try to keep, I think Public Works would continue to try to keep the access, but that is part of Hennepin County's request.
I'm just going down the road of what's front yard, what's backyard then. I mean, if that changes,
That's the
you know what do we have to change address? Do we have to change all this stuff? I'm, as you guys know, I always think a little differently and stuff, but I'm in favor of the fence as long as it doesn't impede access to that transformer and the generator. And as far as the safety for the pump house and stuff, I'm all for what the planning commission recommended.
It's there for emergencies.
Yep.
So if there's something that's knocked out power, it might damage the generator too.
I'd like quicker access to those two things instead of tearing down shrubs and those kind of things that would have to cover it.
Did staff want, if we went the fence route, any more detail on what we're looking for in the fence in terms of style or?
What I heard was there's some direction where there's a couple different types we could select from, and it would have to be representative of the building, and not the right verbiage, but I think we could work with you, and if there was options, we could bring it back independently, or just, I think we could work around it.
We sent some good fence options to Wright Hennepin. We could look at those.
It's just more of a, what would you guys like to see? I mean, honestly, not very much heartburn around this from my end. It's just addressing the code, and there's pros and cons to each, so it's really more.
A vision for something like this would be concrete walls, zero maintenance, those kind of things, and then some appropriate gates for easy access and easy maintenance for you.
Probably not a concrete fence, I wouldn't think.
I think like a faux stone would be appropriate.
Yeah, we can,
I'm just, just least amount of maintenance possible, but most amount of accessibility, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there were some that were designed for electrical substations that
Yeah.
were like a heavy-duty plastic with metal reinforcement, so it would take like 110 mile an hour winds and still stand up.
That our substation group didn't like.
That they didn't like.
Yep.
Okay,
Cool.
I don't think that part can be figured out later. So if someone wanted to make a motion, I'll entertain it.
I'll make the motion as written in here with the,
So option 2 is the planning commission recommendation, and I will add they also required more coniferous trees in that resolution. So assuming you agree with that, then you would just approve the option 2 as written. If you're less concerned about coniferous trees throughout the site, then we would just need to strike that verbiage.
I'd like to make the motion as written.
Okay.
And recommended by the planning commission.
Do I have a second? Any further discussion?
If you pull up the last slide, you can see that summary.
Oops.
There we go.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
Thank you, Kendra.
Thanks, Kendra.
the further discussion is kind of a little less
Yeah,
impactful when it's
we'll
just
on.
three of us.
Call
Yeah.
back if I need to talk on that other item.
All right, I will, if we do. Thank you very much.
Okay, on to 8C, which is a defense ordinance amendment. If I can speak today, that'd be great.
So our last planning item is a zoning ordinance amendment that proposes changes to some lot definitions and our performance standards for fences and walls. Go ahead. So the request tonight is for the city council to make final approval on the verbiage proposed on our city-driven zoning ordinance amendment stemming from discussion on our fence performance standards. So the ordinance in front of you tonight proposes 3 changes to lot-related definitions, including adding definitions for lot frontage and interior lot lines, which are terms of art that we rely on, particularly in the fence standards. Additionally, back when we were thinking a lot more changes were going to be made to our lot-related definitions, we did have some discussion on modifying our lot width. This is separate from the fence performance standards, but just to be conscious of our resources and time, we thought if we're going to change everything else, we might as well look at this too. This would allow for lots on a cul-de-sac to have their lot width measured at the required front setback, which would help with some of the flexibility that our PUD districts rely on. And then, so I believe this would strengthen our underlying code. And then furthermore, hopefully encourage developers to try to stick to our standard plats, which is something we've talked about as a desire. The Planning Commission did recommend that the updated definition be removed from the ordinance and handled separately, if at all. I would make the argument that we've already noticed and held the public hearing, so to hold another public hearing on just this item, if it's something that the council agrees with in principle, would not be the best use of staff resources. Go ahead, next slide. So for the fences and wall performance standards, the new verbiage clarifies when encroachment agreements are required or encourages adequate access for maintenance. There is a change to the threshold for zoning permits from a somewhat arbitrary rule right now of 6 feet from the property line to match up with our 25 feet from lot frontages requirement as well, which should cover both drainage and utility easements as well as easements that we have for trails and sidewalks. and then 10 feet from our interior lot lines or any other drainage and utility ponding easement to cover some of those lots that have either a pond or wetland on there. The verbiage would allow fences of up to 7 feet tall and 100% opacity to be placed as close as 25 feet to the front property line or the principal structure setback of the underlying district, whichever is less. There is an exception for properties with frontage on an arterial road. The Planning Commission did recommend that we allow for some flexibility for these properties, so it's a 100-foot setback, but they could reduce this to 60 feet with additional landscaping by utilizing a flexibility clause we already have for building setbacks. Additionally, there's specification that fences cannot interfere with a 30-foot site visibility triangle measured from intersections as well as driveways on the property for the fence as well as adjacent properties. Next slide. Oh, it doesn't want to work. Oh, there we go. So conversations with Public Works that happened a little bit after our last discussion was adding some performance standards for swimming pools and spas, hot tubs. It's not necessarily that staff feels particularly strong that we do this, it's just we do get this question regularly, and since we're already evaluating this, it's just good to have this be a discussion point. The Planning Commission recommended we remove these standards. The motion specifically seemed to be contingent on it being duplicative of what is in state statute. And I did confirm with Mike, our construction services specialist, who was nice enough to do some research for me, that the state rule is specific to public pools. And additionally, the building code for the state also excludes the regulation of private pools that would be in the International Building Code. So ultimately, Minnesota has decided to leave this up to cities to regulate private pools. And this language would apply to private pools, not necessarily a swimming pool that exists today without a fence, but future pools that were installed. And then additionally, Public Works wanted to add some specific wall standards for retaining walls, particularly when they're along a right-of-way or public trail, and then there is a drop within so many feet of that trail, so that we can require a fence. It's something that we've been able to work through with developers, but requiring it in code would provide us with a lot more ability to say, no, this is a requirement, you're going to do this. Next slide. So the recommendation, Planning Commission recommendation approved with the caveats discussed to the lot width definition and the swimming pool fences. Staff recommends approval of the ordinance as written, which does include both those items, and the resolution approving findings of fact, as well as the summary ordinance, but since we are down a member tonight, that item, specifically that item, we can rule on the other two. Should be moved to the following meeting, and we'll probably add that on consent. And I think I kind of already went over both those explanation points below, so that is what I have for you tonight.
Very good, thank you. Anyone want to start off the discussion? I think we generally have, because we've seen it a lot and discussed it a lot, have agreement amongst us and Planning Commission and staff on the main body of this amendment. The other points that Natalie brought up, obviously being the cul-de-sac width issue and the pool fencing issue. I don't know where you guys stand on those.
I'm fine with the ordinance updates as written, but I wanted to just get a little more detail, and if there was any justification from the Planning Commission why we would not want to update the lot width definition.
So I think I really don't want to put words in their mouth. I can't remember exactly what was said. I feel like there was one member who would prefer that the city kept our standards strict so that it would force developers to have to ask for flexibility that we get to decide on a later point. I think this contradicts with some of the goals we've identified though as staff and council, which is to strengthen our underlying codes so that people rely less on the PUD flexibility. This has been on staff's list of code updates for a couple of years now. So it's, the other thing that was a point of debate was that it just didn't seem like it was related to the rest of it. And again, I make the argument that it was related because we did discuss this as part of all of the lot-related definitions. So while the nexus might not be clear to the Planning Commission because they haven't been involved in the discussion from the beginning, there was a reason why it got brought up. And again, we've already held the public hearing. So if you agree with it in principle, it makes sense to improve it. If you don't agree with it in principle, then I did, in the packet, I provided what would need to be removed from the ordinance.
It does not look like Jay was able to join us as
Okay.
our planning commission liaison.
Dean was there. That helps.
She summarized it very well.
And obviously Natalie's there too.
I feel like we have enough requirements in code, with the exception of buffer zones between adjacent areas, that if somebody submits a plan that meets code requirements, I am okay with that. So on that basis, I don't feel like we need another thing that tips people into the PUD route, so I would be okay approving as is.
Okay.
I have nothing to add to that.
Processing. I think, yeah.
And what,
with that.
the reason for 4/5 on,
Summary ordinance.
Summary.
oh, got it, okay.
State law just requires
Yep,
the
4/5
of the members, not necessarily the percentage in the summary
Right.
ordinance requirement.
Got it.
Anything on the pool side of things?
I think most people who have a pool are forced to have a fence by their insurance anyway. This just ensures that they're all going to be consistent.
And again, this would, you said not necessarily for existing.
Yeah, we specifically wrote in the language that it would not apply to pools already in existence, as kind of a compromise, so that we're not springing this upon current property owners.
Right.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I will entertain a motion to approve, to adopt ordinance 2022-465, amending sections 1020.020 and 1060.080 of the zoning ordinance and approving resolution 2022-113, approving the findings of fact.
So moved.
As discussed, that version as discussed. Do I have a second?
Sure, second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. We are done with planning business. On to unfinished business. We will have another public comment opportunity for items 9A, 9B, 9C, and 9D. And then we'll go right into 9A.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. For our public comment opportunity, anyone in the audience can press star, can come to the podium and state your name and address, but if you're joining us virtually, press *9 for reactions and raise your hand. Mayor, at this time, no one is raising their hand, so we'll definitely start with 9A.
Sounds good. Which is City Center Drive and 79th Place Mass Grading and Stormwater Agreement.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Over the past several weeks, we've been working with St. Therese on putting together an agreement that would outline the cost share related to the projects for mass grading of the site that is that is owned by St. Therese and the city of Corcoran. We don't jointly own them, but it would be a joint project to mass grade both portions, and then do a stormwater improvement project as well. And what we worked with St. Therese and Public Works Director Mattson on is an agreement that would require the city to pay 45% of the costs and St. Therese to pay 55% of the costs, and that's related to how much of the project is our improvements and how much of the project is St. Therese improvements. And so outlined today as a cost share agreement that has been vetted by the city attorney. I would note over the last few weeks, we did have some changes to just related to some language on how the funds
in the agreement would work, and all of that is really related to the financing constraints to ensure that we have clean title for St. Therese and allowing some ability to require mechanics liens and things like that. So Kevin might have some additional comments, but in general, it sounds like we were able to get an agreement that we're comfortable with.
Do you have anything else?
I don't really have any other comments. I'd be happy to clarify anything unless you want me to walk through it more, but it really just is, it's a good deal for the city. If these projects were built independently, the cost for each would be significantly more. So it's a advantageous opportunity that the city would be seeking as well.
So if I remember right, we're doing a cost share because the way we're doing the mass grading and the stormwater enable additional development to use the same stormwater ponding. So this is a way to incentivize and lower the barrier for additional development in the downtown area.
Couple things there, if I can take them one at a time. The benefit, whether we had individual grading internal to St. Therese or we were absorbing it into a regional pond, we still would have pursued a cost share on a project like this, and it's due to how you mass grade a site. So, you know, the soils underneath, you have to peel out all the bad soils and flop over the new soils. Well, if you do them independently, you're importing and exporting a ton more dirt. Then if you have a larger area, you can balance the site better. So regardless of the stormwater maintenance agreement, we still would have pursued a project like this. The second part of your question that I heard was, we talked about doing a stormwater pond. Regional ponds allow for denser areas, i.e. more benefit, consistent with our southeast plan. This pond here really only serves the remaining portion of our site and St. Therese. So I would categorize it as a sub-regional pond. It's not really gonna take more water from any other development other than what the St. Therese property is and potentially anything else in our city hall property, if that makes sense. Did that kind of answer your question, or did I get something?
Okay, I thought we had upsized it so that there would be more capacity for other
We
areas.
pursued that and evaluated that in the design, and so we have maximized this site, but it's not, I don't want the perception to be as like property to the south can come into here. Potentially, you could do a project where you add it, but that's not really in this. We've maximized this, we've oversized it to account for future development within the loop, I call it, but not really other properties to the south. But we did evaluate, was there benefit to do that? In the design process, it was determined that there was not significant benefit. So instead of it being a regional pond, I call it sub-regional, because it's still impacting multiple properties. It still has that benefit, but it's on a sub-basis. And a lot of that's due to topography.
Is there a way to show which properties would be positively
If you
impacted?
can pull up this map, it's really the city of Corcoran property, and then what we sold to St. Therese is really the properties that would pick up on it.
Okay.
There is an option to do a little bit more to the south if the property owner to the south wanted to expand. We did talk to them about participating in the project, and they did not want to at this point. There is a potential where we could expand this pond if that was the choice and convenient to the developer. But so we did exhaust those avenues to make sure we were efficient with stormwater management. And so this plan is consistent with what we adopted in the St. Therese Development Agreement.
Anything else?
My question kind of pertains to the actual mass grading and such. Does everything stay on site? Is there, in the instance of right now, we are seeing significant impact to one of our gravel roads on the western side of the city to Bechtold from, I did not realize that Cook Lake Highlands, a lot of their dirt was going to be hauled out and down a gravel road and such. Is this contained within the site? Is there dirt going to be hauled away off-site? Where's it going to be, or is that nothing we can control?
Great questions. We always maximize everything we can site, because that lowers the cost, and that's why a larger footprint benefits
Yep.
everyone. In this specific case, we're probably long, this is off the top of my head, 50,000 yards of topsoil. There's
Okay.
a significant amount of topsoil on here. We've looked at everywhere to go with it, and so in the package that was bid and approved, they will be hauling off 50,000 yards of topsoil, which is a fair amount of topsoil. As we have options to either select a place to haul it, or we let that be the responsibility of the
Okay.
contractor. Typically, we let that be the responsibility of the contractor. In that case, that's what we've done in this. If somebody were to move it within Corcoran, they have to do it within our road standards, and they have to do it permitted. So if it was going to one site, that would trigger a grading permit that
Okay.
we'd have to pursue. If they do that without us, they can contact us, and there's a process for that, if someone's doing something inappropriately. So I think that hopefully answered a little bit of.
It does. I see the impact to that gravel road from 10 all the way down to Streeter, that Bechtold Road and such. And I know you guys are already having conversations with those folks and stuff. It's a tremendous amount of dirt being moved. And I'm estimating in my days off here, at least 40 trips an hour. 20 in, 20 out is what I'm seeing and that's a lot for a gravel road to handle, and you guys already know that, so.
Yeah, there's.
Just curious on the impact here. 50,000 cubic yards is half the size of Mount Trevera that we had,
Yeah,
roughly,
that's a
so.
substantial amount of topsoil.
Yep,
Yeah.
okay.
And that's just given by, and that's based on, a fair amount of holes in the
All the
ground.
soil borings and
But
stuff that
that
went
can
on.
vary 5 feet
Yep.
over, so, we might get into it and there might be more, there might be less. We might find a pocket where of good stuff and then that would be reduced. So it's a little bit of, you do enough to get a good plan, and then you could do double that and still not hit, a line change under the ground, so. Monitoring our roads is a huge priority to our guys. It's a
Yep.
huge challenge to the community, and we do our best, and, if anyone's got questions, they can contact me. We can have a discussion about what's going on.
Runoff on this property is all going to the east?
Primarily to the northeast, and there is a section that, if you see right in the linear park area, there's a little bit of grading. Right down, now to the left. There's a little bit of grading, basically kind of on the west side of the park. That area drains underneath 116 and basically through the north end of the Rush Creek development. There's a small part that goes north, which then immediately wraps around and goes east.
I'm just concerned with the residents across the street.
Yep, we have identified that. The watershed's approved this. We're waiting on one permit, but it's all been evaluated. And so we are managing that water like we would a developer. We treat ourselves following the same rules.
I know they've had significant concerns with the property to the to the west of them and stuff, and you are well aware of all of that. Thank you.
Councilor
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Nichols, one of the questions that you has, the land in there, Kevin was talking about this area. One of the areas that would be serviced by the pond is this, you said the north loop that's not currently developed, but is planned to over the future.
And
That'll be
then our
St. Teresa's
That
expansion.
would be St. Teresa's planned expansion. We don't have any exact timeline on that, exactly when that would be, but that is planned for future expansion.
And that's part of the cost share that we developed. It was evaluated on, earth moving and on impervious. And there's a exhibit C in there shows the breakdown. It's based off of those two quantifications.
Okay.
And so there's more impervious with that site. Therefore, there's more responsibility for St. Therese.
And I would note, the staff report, I didn't touch on in the presentation, the budget impact, but there, with the sale of land, covers a good portion of the cost for the project, but there's a gap, and part of what we're talking tonight would be the bond conduit financing, and fees potentially going to that or looking at other options for that.
Okay, any other questions or concerns? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the cost share agreement as presented.
I'll second, or I'll make the recommendation if that's what you were asking.
Got a motion?
Second.
Perfect. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Perfect. 9B, request for bond conduit financing or host approval.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. In September, at our last meeting, we discussed a request that we received from St. Therese to move forward with either being a bond conduit finance, or providing the issuance of bond financing, or being host approval. So at that meeting on the 8th, we tabled it to today to have some further discussion. One of the other items that we discussed is creating a option for a bond conduit policy, and so we're really trying to get some feedback from council to move that forward. There are a few areas, policy options that we wanted to consider. What type of administrative fee would we want? Whether to charge a fee for refunding and refinancing, looking at if we wanted to have some sort of credit rating or denomination requirement, looking at whether or not we want to have an application fee for host approval, and then whether or not we want to have an application. So those are a few of the policy items that we would want to have discussion on tonight. I would envision us moving forward with having some discussion on the policy, maybe bringing back an incorporated version of the policy here. But tonight, we do have the formal request in front of us and could either move forward with being the issuer of the bonds and holding the public hearing for that, or we could move forward with host approval. Those would be the two options to continue this type mechanism for financing of the project. And I do believe we have Calvin from St. Therese joining us virtually. If Calvin cannot, if we're having technical issues, Calvin called me today, so I've got his contact information if we need to.
Sounds good.
So with that, I'd take any questions, and we do have Gina here, our bond counsel, if you need or have any specific questions related to this project. And we would look at the fee that was proposed by St. Therese was $50,000. What is in some of the drafts options for the policy, it really could range, and we could put in there what amount you'd like to see. It does vary across the state. I spoke with the city of Delano, and they didn't have any fees that they've done for bond conduit financing, and I've seen others that have the 1% or somewhere in between. So I think we have a big variety and some good discussion points on that.
Thank you. Jeremy, look, you had something to...
Oh, I always do. I have a math question for Gina. If you need to calculate this, it's okay. I was wondering, I know that these conduit programs are a great way for applicants to save on the rates they need to pay on their bonds. Roughly what is the advantage that an applicant would gain in terms of that interest rate if they use conduit financing versus a commercial bond?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, again, I'm Gina Farini from Kennedy and Graven, and we serve as the city's bond counsel. Unfortunately, I think that number varies on the type of the deal and what the market is doing. My guess is Kelvin, if he's available, probably has talked with his bank about the difference, and he may be able to shed some light on that.
If he's hooked up, that'd be great. If not...
Calvin, do you want to try speaking? If not, I'll have you give my cell phone a call.
Yeah, so just to confirm if you can hear me?
We can hear you.
Yay!
Great. Well, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I apologize for not being in person. I'm in strict quarantine this week due to some unfortunate news earlier in the week, but I'm feeling well, and I'd be happy to answer that question. The tax exempt reduction that we typically see can vary depending upon the type of bonds that are issued. But the particular bank that we're working for a tax exempt reduction or discount It's roughly 11% of the interest rate that's offered by the bank.
Okay. Assuming Jeremy has follow-up?
So I guess that would mean, you're saying 11% of the rate. So if the rate was 5%, you'd be saving 0.55% in interest. Okay.
That's correct. Yep.
Very good. So it seems a lot like buying points on a mortgage when you take one out, schematically to me, right? You're paying a fee to get a lower rate in the debt market. So, staff did some good research for us and found a study that, depending upon the governmental entity, listed how much they typically have for their fee. And it was for cities, I think it was between 0.25% and 1% of the value of the bonds. So I feel like we should develop our own internal parameters for a policy before we talk about St. Therese in particular, just because it's hard to have an objective view of a specific proposal. It's easier to generalize. And looking at neighboring cities, it looked like Maple Grove had about a 1% as their default, but they would potentially negotiate that. So they're at the upper end of the range that was in that study that was provided. I feel like for us as a city, we shouldn't be higher than our neighbors, but I wouldn't want to be out of their same ballpark. So from a policy perspective, I would like to see it probably between 0.75 and 0.9%. And I think having a parameter for negotiation would make sense. There may be some cases where there's compelling interest for the city that we would want to make it lower, or if the value is especially high for the bonds, maybe it becomes onerous. But in terms of giving staff guidance on, generally what we would want to entertain, that's where I would be at. What do you two think?
I agree with the second part that you said of having kind of language in there to allow us to negotiate, depending on the circumstance, for sure. Trying to math in my head here a bit with, you said 0.75 to 0.9 is kind of where you are in terms of that range. I know initially we talked more in the 0.5 range at one point to the 1.25 or whatever was the range in the staff report. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think what that 0.75 on the value of this.
Let's be general.
Well, yeah, but.
Because we can negotiate a specific instance, but from a policy
You're wanting to set
perspective,
that
if you're going to
policy
get 10 of
first.
these in a year, where do you want to see those come in? I don't think we will get 10 in a year, but
Yeah.
as we're defining policy, that's probably a right level to think about.
I'd be comfortable with that 0.75 range and then with the ability to negotiate. Thoughts?
I'm still in the, trying to understand how we're not on the hook for anything if we do this.
Gotcha.
The numbers that you guys are talking to make sense. I absolutely trust what you and our attorney is telling us and those kind of things. The research and the conversations that I've had with folks, I just don't understand how it just seems too good to be true. We could turn this into a revenue generator.
Well, and part of that
For
would
us.
be based on, especially if you're talking about getting it from other cities that got host approval,
Yeah.
that would depend, I would assume, a lot on what your rate is and what you're charging, because otherwise they'd go elsewhere for it.
So I'm on the fence.
Gotcha.
I moved from an absolute no to.
Fair enough.
I'm listening with open ears, so.
So for the sake of conversation, if we were to go down that route, do you have any thoughts on the numbers?
I'd like the percentage and the ability to bargain and talk about and such.
And you like the percentage more than a flat fee?
I think so.
Okay.
I'd rather go that way. We're talking the percentage is based off of what's borrowed?
Yes.
And what is being borrowed on this, or what would be borrowed?
Kelvin, can you, I have an estimate, I think it was 46 million, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It's a project this size, 46 million. A fee that we were anticipating was would have been comparable to something like 10 basis points, maybe a little bit more than that. That would be 0.1%. In contrast or comparison to the 0.75 that was suggested.
With the numbers you're talking, that's a significant increase in fee from 50,000 to 500,000.
Yeah, it's 345.
Rough numbers.
345.
I rounded up, so, okay.
75.
I think to Jeremy's point, that would maybe be the policy we're talking about, not necessarily the specific instance here.
Yeah.
I just want to jump in for 1 minute. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, another option is, it sounds like the 345,000 might be a little of a scary number too, but you could cap it. You could say like the greater of 0.75%, or I mean the lesser of 0.75%, or if you wanted to sort of, not to make things more complicated, I apologize.
No, I appreciate it. It's a good thought.
It's good to have
I've just seen some cities that have done that, so.
Yeah, I think that's where the negotiation piece could play in. You could have either that formally in the policy, or that could be something that you decide, hey, this is more than is appropriate, and we'll curtail it for this one.
But if we go off of the numbers we're talking right now, would St. Therese be interested at $350,000 as a fee, or would they just say, never mind, we're going someplace else to hunt that down? Please bless that for us. I'm just guessing that's what they would do.
That's a great question. Kelvin might be able to speak to that.
Yeah, but Mr. Mayor, members of the council, at that level, we would, just being honest and forward, we're experiencing extreme challenges right now with construction pricing, materials, labor, you name it. If there was a year to negotiate, we certainly want to give benefit back to the issuer as much as we possibly can. I can tell you right now, we have budgeted of just under 20 basis points as opposed to 75. So at that level, we would seek alternative issuers and request host approval. If I could, just some of the considerations to weigh in here. Oftentimes when there's, we will have refinancings. We sometimes will have, in the past, financings of 20 million, maybe 30 million. This is the largest issuance of debt that St. Therese will have in our history. So it's to use a percentage, a simple formula and a percentage multiplier would place a significant burden on the total project fund, which we're really trying to make do. You've probably seen that we're coming back with the site plan amendment later in October for approval due to some of the challenges, economic challenges, not necessarily financial, but labor related. So it is a very, very stressed project already. We're trying to make it, obviously get it into feasible state, but I'd also say that the fee, from my perspective and experience, has been higher in more developed communities that have has infrastructure in place, like maybe Woodbury or Maple Grove, to where when a developer does come in, they're not having to fetch utilities. There may be utilities that are close by and infrastructure that's already in place by the city. On this particular project, we're well north of $2 million to bring utilities from just north of Bass Lake Road up to the entrance of City Hall there. That, and then also running utilities around the site, sanitary, up north and to the west for our purposes, and then also to the east for the sole benefit of city and future developers to tap into. So if I could just maybe ask that maybe some of that consideration been given and a decent range for the negotiation fees.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great, Kelvin. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to know what's going on in your head.
Mine are his.
Both of you, but particularly Jeremy, because I know he's been running numbers.
I'm just gonna listen a lot more. I'm curious if our bond folks could give us a recommendation, but what else you got going on
Oh, that's
there?
fine.
If you could recommend to us. I still am trying to figure out how we would not be on the hook for anything.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I mean, you're asking for a recommendation on the fee, or do you have more questions sort of about sort of not being on the hook? Do you want me?
Not being on the hook on
Yeah.
any payback, anything. I don't want to burden our residents with any liability whatsoever.
Right. As I sort of explained last